Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are waiting on a few more participants to join us. Thank you for your patience. We'll get started here in a few minutes. Hello, everyone. We are now ready to get started. Commissioners, I am now turning on your ability to start your audio and your video.
Well, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Everybody's logging in. I should mention before we start that random sightings of pets and grandchildren is always welcome. Kind of lightens the load, so to speak. So let me just go ahead and start. I've got about 4 minutes after 1. This is the November 5th, 2020 public hearing on permanently transitioning the state government workforce to remote work, part 2. My name is Pedro Nava, and I am the chairman of the Little Hoover Commission. Thank you all for joining us today. Let me introduce the other commissioners who are here with us on Zoom. Joining us today is Vice Chair Sean Varner. Hello, Sean. Commissioners Dion Aaroner, David Byer, who I think is there, Bill Emerson, Kathy Schwamberger, and Jana Sidley. We, at this point, don't have our legislative members, I think due to other commitments. Doesn't mean that one or two of them won't show up later on. Also with us today are the Commission staff, Executive Director Ethan Rarick, Deputy Executive Director Tamar Foster, who has a different background I noticed today. Project managers Crystal Beckham and Tristan Stein, and analysts Sherry McAllister, Ashley Hurley, and Rachel Manioli. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Commissioners' audio and video will be turned on throughout the duration of the hearing. Commissioners, you may mute yourself if you wish. Remember to unmute yourself when you want to make a comment or ask a question. As is my practice, I scan the screen to see who is unmuted, and I take that as an indication that you wish to either make a comment or ask a question. And if for some reason I don't catch you, you just wave or speak up. None of you are terribly shy about all of that. And Kathy, look at your background. That's gorgeous. Wonderful. The video and audio of our hearing witnesses will be turned on when it is their chance to speak. Members of the public will be muted during the hearing. As is standard for the commission, we will have a public comment session at the end. Those who wish to make a comment will be unmuted during that public comment session. On the screen, you see the graphic that refers to the raise the hand feature in Zoom. You can click on it to join our public comment queue. That's one of the ways that we know that you want to make a comment. There are those of us who have joined by phone. You may send an email to littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov, which is also displayed on the screen, letting us know that you want to address the commission. You must provide the phone number from which you have joined the meeting so that our staff knows who to unmute. Staff will be monitoring raised hands and emails requesting comment throughout the duration of our hearing. As is usual at the commission hearings, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. We are recording today's hearing, and after the meeting, staff will place a permanent link to the recording on our website and upload it to our YouTube channel. And now to the substance of today's hearing. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced our state government into a radical experiment in remote work. Tens of thousands of state employees, including our own staff, abruptly transitioned last spring to working from home. A survey of state agencies this summer found that roughly 3 out of 4 employees were working remotely full-time, up from just 3.4%. That's 3.4% before the pandemic. But should that transition be made permanent? If so, what would be the advantages for state government and for the residents? What are the potential pitfalls? Our commission began looking at this topic 2 weeks ago when we held our first hearing on the subject. We took testimony from 2 leading independent experts on remote work, learning about how and why advocates see this as a potential benefit to the state and to the people that we serve. Today, we'll continue to examine this topic, and we're going to hear from 2 key leaders of organized labor. Unions represent the backbone of our state workforce, and the commission is eager to hear this important perspective. So, for example, do the organizations that represent state workers believe that permanent telework is a good option for their members? How do they believe workers should be managed if they are working remotely? What do workers need or want in terms of technology or other home office equipment, health and safety protections, or financial compensation for costs accrued through remote work? Are unions willing to accept reduced office footprints for state agencies, even if that means a permanent elimination of desk space or office space for some workers? What would remote work mean for the ability of labor to organize workers? We hope that our hearing today and our other research will shed light on these and other questions. At a future hearing, we hope to learn of the Newsom administration's views on permanent remote work for the state government workforce. And we anticipate releasing a report on this topic sometime in the coming year. Ethan, if you'd be so kind as to introduce our witnesses.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We have 2 witnesses today. The first is Yvonne Walker. Ms. Walker is president of SEIU 1000, which represents 96,000 state workers. She began working for the state of California at the Department of Justice in 1995 and soon became a union steward and led efforts to organize her coworkers at the DOJ. Before becoming president of Local 1000, she chaired the union's Office and Allied Workers Bargaining Team and later took on the role as vice president for bargaining. In May of 2008, she broke racial and gender barriers to become the first African-American woman president of SEIU Local 1000. Currently, Walker is also a vice president on SEIU International's executive board. She has participated on boards as varied as the SEIU International Futures Committee and SEIU's International Retirement Security Committee, which she chairs. She also currently sits on California's Secure Choice Retirement Investment Board. As you know, Mr. Chairman, SEIU 1000 is by far the largest representative of state government employees, and so we're very grateful to hear Ms. Walker's perspective on this issue. Ms. Walker, please.
Welcome and thank you.
Hi, this is Ashley. I'm working with Yvonne on getting her audio working.
See, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realize that we had a slight technical glitch here.
Well, that's okay. That'll give us about a couple of minutes to get caught up. Now, Dion, how do you like your microphone?
I love it.
Oh my God, we can hear you.
Isn't that amazing?
No, it's wonderful audio. I'm so glad that happened.
And Ashley took me, and I thought it was going to be complicated setting up, and of course it took 2 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff, like I'm using a webcam. It's plug and play. I mean, you don't have to download anything unless
Right,
you
exactly.
Right. You just plug it in and it's, they're smarter than we are.
Yeah,
as David, I'm sure, would be willing to tell us.
Yeah.
Very, very soon. It won't take long.
But you won't know whether or not I'm muted or not, because it doesn't reflect, when I turn it off, it doesn't reflect that I'm muted.
Okay.
So you're going to look and say that, look at me and think I'm unmuted all the time when I'm not.
Okay. Understand. And I see Miss Walker.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe Ms. Walker is on, and we now have audio for her, I believe.
Now, and I can recognize you by the purple, the SEIU purple.
Yes.
Of course.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sorry for the technical glitches. So I'm just going to dive right in. So we're living in what I call a VUCA world, right? VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And never has that been more apparent than now in 2020 in living with the pandemic. In March, when the dangers and impacts of COVID-19 first became apparent, the governor did the right thing by issuing the shelter-in-place order and telling state departments to send their employees home to work while still protecting the crucial functions that state employees provide. In my 25 years working for the state of California, I've never seen us work so fast. In just 2 weeks' time, approximately 75% of our workforce was working at home. And I will just say, prior to the pandemic, every time we raised telework on a broad scale, we were always faced with why it wouldn't work. And COVID-19 opened us up to the possibility that, yes, indeed, it can work. And while it was the right thing at the right time, there was no time for any real planning to transition to a telework workforce because we were in an emergency. So at this moment in time, I find it exciting that we have this opportunity to reimagine the way we do our work. We have an opportunity which does not come along often in government work to take a look at how we do our work, what changes and innovations can be put into place to still provide our critical functions, while at the same time providing cost savings for the state and for employees. I think it is essential that the state has a comprehensive policy where at least 75% of the workforce is teleworking. This would be good for the state. It would be good for the employees, in addition to providing the opportunity for more flexibility and career mobility for employees. But I should point out that sending employees home to work is not the same as having a comprehensive telework policy that should be crafted at the state level and not department by department. And it also should ensure that you have the necessary infrastructure that can support such a policy. So here are some things that I think need to be put into place to have to realize a workforce that teleworks. One, every department should have a telework coordinator that reports directly to that department director. And all requests for telework should go through the telework coordinator. This would ensure a consistent approach within a department. Too often we have found in the past that when employees have requested it, if they worked for a supervisor or a manager that did not believe in teleworking, then it would just be denied and it wouldn't really be considered. Having a telework coordinator, again, like I said, has a consistency. It also has somebody that thinks about it all the time, and they're thinking about it in the way of making it work, all the reasons why you should say yes, and not all the reasons why you should say no. And again, it's important that they report directly to the department director. Managers and supervisors should be trained on managing a workforce that teleworks. It is a lot different. If your employees are not seeing them every day, you don't get to have that interaction, and you are more of a coach and a mentor. You're more concerned about output and not process, right? I believe that as we go into a teleworking workforce, departments should provide an annual report to this commission on their telework programs with metrics that can be established, just to make sure that it's running in the way that we have all envisioned. And again, I just want to emphasize that you have to have, and you should make sure that you have the right infrastructure in place. And next, I thought I'd talk a little bit about best practices on managing a workforce that teleworks. One of the first things I can say is trust your employees. Managers and supervisors need to put the utmost trust and confidence in their employees to do the right thing and get their work done, even if they can't see them. I think this has played out all across the state. One of the most significant examples is at CalPERS. In talking to the executive director, Marcy Frost, I believe they have one of the best telework policies that we have in the state, and they have actually found that production has gone up and not gone down just because their employees are home working.
You said that was CalPERS?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then I think it's important that you, when you go to a telework scenario, that you co-create with the employees. And that's to set the tone and foster confidence before a new teleworking program begins. Managers should engage in dialogue with their teams and address any questions about telework. They should ask team members to discuss and achieve consensus on solutions to the questions, and that'll help the team become more interested in investing in making a teleworking initiative a success. Again, I can't stress this enough. The third thing is to focus on outputs, not processes. At this time, many employees, they're juggling work. They're juggling their families. They have kids that are distance learning. They have a whole lot of things going on right now. Enabling employees to complete their work in ways that are easiest and most productive for them really helps with productivity for the state. I think we're going to have to ask ourselves, I believe it's a state law that state offices have to be open from 8 to 5. But I mean, I think this is an opportunity to redefine what open is, right? Do you actually have to have a building to walk into? Is there work being done? The fourth thing in managing a workforce at Teleworks is communication. Having regular team meetings where employees can connect, check in, and collaborate. You can do that, you can use simple surveys to ask specific questions that can help track output, while recognizing that virtual communication are different. As we're finding out today, they're not perfect. But still you've got to be professional and respectful of others. And we have to realize that virtual communications are sometimes, they may be less comfortable and effective for some. So that's when you have to coach employees on when and how to escalate virtual exchanges. I have a practice that I will exchange one email with you, and by the time the second one comes around, I'm going to pick up the telephone because there has been some miss in communication, and to make sure that that doesn't escalate. And fifth, we have to make sure that employees have the technology that they need to be successful. Teleworking is more than just having a mobile phone and a laptop, even if you don't have, the wide breadth of technology, you can still equip employees to function remotely. Things that you have to consider, like when we went home very quickly in a 2-week period of time, there wasn't time to do ergonomic evaluations, right? Most people sat at their kitchen tables or wherever was convenient in their homes, but you really do have to set up a dedicated workplace. We have to make sure that internet connections are what they need to be. Do the computers that the employees have at home and that we've given them, do they have cameras so that we can do meetings by Zoom, so we can do check-ins by Zoom? There are going to be a lot of IT solutions that I think that we should look at, and most of them not very expensive but important to have. And then the last thing I would say in managing a workforce at Teleworks, not just a workforce at Teleworks, all your workforce, treat employees like valuable stakeholders. Every department over the past few years, they have developed their core values and why it's important and how important the employees are. And now is a time more than ever, it is important to reinforce those values. Going to a more permanent telework environment is going to be hard because it's a change process. And the one thing I know about change processes are they are infinitely more successful when you have buy-in from your key stakeholders. And you don't do that unless they know they're valued and their input is valued. And now I'm going to shift a little into cost savings. So I believe that going into a telework environment presents an opportunity for cost savings not only for the state, but also for employees. It is time for us to rethink whether we need big office buildings anymore. If we have 75% of our workforce teleworking, does the state of California need the real estate that it has, the leases? Employees are not coming in every day. So that would be a huge cost savings. You have more of a rotating workforce. The benefit is you could put more than one department in a building, and they do it something along the lines of the startup WeWorks, where when you have to go into an office and you need the infrastructure of an office, you have the ability to go in and book space, be it a conference room, an office room, for X amount of time. And we really should explore that in a very real way. There's also the savings of we've gotten a lot more familiar with doing either Zoom meetings, WebEx, different webinars for not only some of the travel that employees have to do, but also for trainings and everything else. And so that represents some of the cost savings. For the employees, it could be a cost savings on their commute time and their commute costs, which is huge. On parking, which is another thing that the state should look at. Right now in state lots, people have dedicated spaces that they pay, X amount of dollars for, anywhere from $75 to $125 a month to have that dedicated space. With the rotating workforce, you have the ability to actually sell more access to the parking lot and not necessarily to the space. And because you don't have your workforce all in at the same time, you're not going to have the problem of people not finding a place to park. And that will eliminate some of the state lots that sit empty because people are teleworking, right? And it just makes it more efficient for everyone around. And just on the side note, it's a lot better for our environment if we have fewer people commuting in and into work and not. And so that's some of the good things.
Ms. Walker, this is Pedro Nava again. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you'll find if some of your comments prompt commissioners, we're going to interrupt you, and I would like for you to consider that a compliment.
That makes it a lot more. I prefer the interaction than just talking at folks. I will take the challenge even for me to do this.
Well, thank you, because I see David Byer is unmuted, and I think Commissioner Aroner. But what I wanted to ask you, not Commissioner Aroner, my mistake. What I wanted to ask you is, has SEIU established some sort of a working group ahead of this in order to discuss and evaluate the remote, the teleworking? Because it sounds as though this is a topic that you and some of your folks on your team have spent a fair amount of time considering.
Yes, we have.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
So then, knowing that, I would certainly encourage the state of California to try to keep up with you.
Thank you.
Of course. Commissioner Byer?
Sure. Thank you very much for appearing before us today. Your testimony is very impressive. I want to get to two questions, but first, agree very much with your comments about flexibility and values. I'm very taken by a book written by Heather Boucher called Finding Time, which respects workers by giving them control over their hours, flexibility, and things like that. I think that's a remarkably insightful comment that you made, and I think that one that values state workers especially. But I also want to avoid the Lake Wobegon problem, which is where all the children are above average. And so I'm going to ask two blunt questions.
Okay.
What's magical about 75%? How did you get to that? Other than that, that's the current state of play. And second question, isn't it realistic to assume that with a state deficit of $50 billion in uncertain federal relief, that there are going to end up being fewer state workers? And how do we have a conversation about the future of work in a reduced workforce sense without causing unnecessary and unwise strife?
Two very good questions. Could you repeat the first one for me, because I got caught up in the second?
What's magic about 75%? Why shouldn't it be 35% or 50%? In other words, shouldn't the workforce, as you pointed out correctly, focus on output as opposed to process? And so why 75? Why not some other number? And shouldn't it be related to visioning or revisioning the delivery of services by state employees, taking into account the Governor's Future of Work Commission, which is co-chaired by the president of SEIU National, and the use of new technologies, artificial intelligence, et cetera. In other words, why should we assume that we're going to end up with the same number of workers doing the same work when we know the content of the work is going to change and the fiscal reality is it's likely to be fewer workers?
So I will say there is nothing magic about 75%. Very simply came to that number. That is the current level where we're at today, and it is working. And I believe you start where you're working, and you can adjust from there. You're right. We have we're in terrible financial times. I mean, I think everybody knows that. It's no secret. And while we will put up a big fight and campaign at the federal level to get more funds into California specifically, but the states in general. I suspect that whatever relief we get will not be as much as we need. But on the other hand, the work that we do is incredibly important. I believe that the state of California already operates with an extremely lean workforce to be able to provide the valuable services to our citizens that we need to. Does the nature of the work change? Absolutely. But does the volume of the work go away? Absolutely not. You're still going to have the same value, the same volume. You're just looking at a different way to accomplish it. And I don't know that we are at the place that we should begin having a conversation about reducing our workforce at this moment in time when we have not done enough analysis and study to know, what exactly that means, how changing the work changes the needs that you would have for a workforce.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you, I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to have more that you were going to speak to. I suspect so. Yeah, okay, please continue.
Okay. And these are just things to be mindful of, right? The reality is, as today, every job is not going to be able to telework. That is just the nature of the beast. You have jobs where it is public facing, like the DMV, or you could have one of our techs who conduct tests on our highways and our byways, or different jobs. So our ag inspectors, right? You're not going to have an ag inspector that is protecting our crops in California from pests and different things coming in across our borders, either through the water or just, from across the border. So they're not going to be able to telework. And then you have a lot of places where, you have to have somebody answering the phone and being on the line, and those things have to be staffed. Typically, those jobs are in classifications that are not eligible for telework, are filled with employees of color and or women, right? And what we don't want to do is to create an unevenness in our workforce. So going to a major telework policy, we have to make sure that it's done in conjunction with alternate work schedules and flexible work, because these workers are experiencing the same things that workers who are able to telework have with their kids at home, things that they have to manage, and everything else. And so we want to make sure that as we move this policy, we're moving it in a way that is equitable and fair to everyone.
Very good. Yes, Commissioner Sidley.
Hi, thank you so much for your testimony. I actually am a government employee. I work for the city of Los Angeles. So I know the work that you do and the extraordinary skill that you bring to it, and also the difficulty in managing all that is going on. So I thank you for all of that. My question would be, a little bit outside of the box as we think about, how to manage and whether or not to go to more of a telework type of environment. What is the response to an employee who, if we have a job classification that is eligible for telework, and you have an employee that you suggest they do it and they don't, or you have an employee who they want to do it, but their house isn't set up, they don't have the computer, they don't have the printer, they don't have the paper. I think you touched on this, but I'm just curious, a little bit deeper dive. Is it to have flexibility in that job classification? So it's the employee's choice ultimately. Do we have to pay and buy all that equipment? Is it fair to buy for one and not for everyone else if someone else has it? Have you addressed those issues?
Not in my testimony, I didn't.
All righty then.
All right. There are going to be some people, I recognize there are going to be some people who might not want to telework, who won't want to telework. I confess I am one of those. I am a horrible teleworker, so I come into the office every day. I find it to be useful to me to have a separation between my home, which is my safe place, and my work. And I do not mix the two. And so that is why I mentioned before in managing it, it's good when you're going into that policy to co-create with your employees, problem solve. Those things will come up. I believe ultimately it is the responsibility of the employer to provide the tools that the employees need to do their jobs, right? And we already have these folks working from home. And here is where there is some unevenness in the process, right? So we have two departments that I'm aware of, Covered California and State Fund, that provide a $74 because of tax consequences, reimbursement to the employees so that if necessary, they can up their broadband at home, right? Because employees were having trouble. But that's a decision that should not have been left to departments and should be something that is statewide. And then they refined it a bit more. They said, we will either give you the $74 or we'll give you a hotspot that will be dedicated for the work that we need you to do. Either one is an acceptable solution to me. Having the printer and the paper, the employer should provide that. But that's where you sit down and you figure out what that is. We did this very quickly and made it work. With a little more analysis, I think we can figure it out so that the cost is not unduly burdensome to the state either. But it is an investment. It's an investment in your workforce. And I believe also that having telework as one of the things that the state can offer makes us a more attractive employer for some of our best and brightest young people out there that might not be considering working for the state because they couldn't imagine going into an office every single day.
Right.
And we have to not only look for our workforce of today, but we have to look for our workforce of tomorrow. And I believe that we can be the model for a lot of government jurisdictions to say, yes, it can be done. It can be done well and efficiently and benefit both the employer and the employees.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
We're dealing with some of those issues as you are here, in my office. And so I was just curious how, you're sort of addressing it. And right now, because we did it quickly as well, I think some of this has been piecemeal. As people call and say, I need ink, okay. It wasn't anything anyone thought about it until it became an issue. So, but as we're trying to come up with ideas for policies now, you're like, I'm learning on the fly. And so that's why I raise it to you, because we're seeing these questions come up.
Absolutely. You know, like I said in the beginning, it was absolutely right that we went out as quickly as we did. But we can no longer say we're in an emergency. We're 8 months in. We should be spending all our time figuring out how do we operationalize this in a very real way. Typically, before going to a telework policy, you would have had, you know, at least a year, if not two, to make sure that you were checking all of the boxes. But, you know,
Right.
We're leapfrogging right now, and I think that's right. We don't get that opportunity often in government work, and I think it's right that we should not miss this opportunity. The other
Commissioner?
thing that
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
one thing I neglected to mention or highlight was the opportunity for career mobility. So typically, when you think about moving up in state service, it is you're going to have to come to Sacramento. You're going to have to go to the headquarters because in our outlying areas, there's only, you know, so many of the higher classifications. Well, we've shown over the last 8 months that you don't have to be in Sacramento. So that broadens the opportunity for people to be able to promote from wherever they may be and still be able to do a very good job. It also solves the question that has been a point of contention from my members with the state of geographic pay. It kind of lessens that because if you don't have to live in a high-cost area and you can still do the same job, it kind of takes that out of the equation.
Right.
Right. Commissioner Arner, did you have something?
Yeah, I
Good,
do.
please.
Right. Thank you for doing this, really, Ms. Walker. This is terrific information. Yvonne, this is Dion Arner. So
Good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. So I'm interested also the impact that this all has on the labor union movement and how organizing happens and how this, right? I mean, I was thinking all along as you were talking, are these the kinds of things you're going to be is the process going to be in a collective bargaining process? Or is it going to be through through legislation or a combination of both? I mean, the governor can't do all of this through executive order, and I don't think it's appropriate.
I don't think it's appropriate either.
No, and so I think it'd be interesting, you know, and then the other thing is that as with 75% of the workforce working from home or somewhere else, not in their office, they might be working at a cafe for all I know. Yeah, well, as long as they get the work done, right? But from an organizing perspective, how do we sustain and maintain and grow the labor movement in California and around public employees when it's so much easier when they're in the building. You walk up and down the hall, right, and walk up in between the desks and you get to talk to them and you can have a meeting with everybody. And you can tell where I come from, you know where I come from. So I'm interested in how we're going to sustain that.
Well, I don't think we will sustain it in that way. I had the good fortune of being on my International's Future of Work Task Force, right, and looking at what does work look like going forward. Also, I have the benefit of leading an organization where I have, you know, approximately 200 employees that we manage. And just like things change for the state overnight, they change for us too on how we connect. What do we connect? I will tell you, we do a lot of Zoom now that we didn't in the future. There is a lot of texting that goes on. It is infinitely more challenging than it has been. We have adopted best practices. For example, one of our locals, 2015, which is the home care workers, right? They don't have a work site. And they have figured out how to organize their workers. And so we're not recreating the wheel, but we're taking best practices of people who have done that. We have a lot of work groups dealing with one of my peers as a leader of a local in Florida, which is a right-to-work state. It's not the same kind of environment and the different things that you have to do. So, yes, my work is going to change, too. Yes, it will be infinitely harder, but it will not be impossible. We have already started down this path. And I feel confident in our ability to adjust and get done. We have already shifted. We had a slight a slight glitch when everybody went home and we were no longer doing in-person new employee orientation.
Oh, mhm.
But we have now figured that out of how to do them, get them done, and bring them on. So it is us on labor side having to learn how to operate in, again, this VUCA world. And for the first time, we negotiated our side letter completely by Zoom. And I would have never thought that would have been possible. And it was, toot our own horn just a little bit, it was a pretty good side letter.
Thanks.
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Schramberger has a question.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's been very informative. As we sit here today and kind of what we've grown to know as our normal, let's say the state were to go in this direction and 75% of the state workforce was, in a work from home status. What do you think the best way to get from where we are today to there is? For example, would after COVID, does everybody go back into the office and then we kind of try to get to the new normal from the old normal? Or do we maintain the status quo while we figure out the new normal and migrate to it from here? What are your thoughts around that?
So, Commissioner, I don't even think we're close to any kind of normal. I know that in March when everybody went home, we were thinking, just a few months and we'll kick COVID's butt and we'll be okay. And my mantra used to be, we just got to get through 2020. I don't believe that we'll know what anything is until the last quarter of 2021. So I don't think we're going to get to where we have mass people back into the offices. But when I say, and maybe I know I wasn't clear. When I say 75% of the workforce teleworking, that doesn't mean that nobody ever comes into the office, right? Because this isn't a one-size-fits-all. It could be that you have your employees grouped so that one group comes in 2 days a week, another group comes in 2 days a week, and on the third day, that's when everybody's out, or something like that on a rotating basis. I think that's going to be incredibly important while COVID-19 is still out there. We don't have a vaccine. We don't know what we're doing. We have to be able to socially distance and keep our employees safe, because the reality is if we're not keeping our employees safe, we're not keeping the public safe, because our employees don't live in a bubble. So I think that we have time to, while we're here, to go back and do the analysis and things that we're going to do to operationalize. But I think it would be remiss of the state of California to bring all their employees back in without saying, well, okay, we're tired of this, and so now we're just going to go back to normal. Nobody knows what normal is anymore, and I believe that's a path we're making as we walk. And we have the opportunity to do it thoughtfully.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Walker, there's a couple of things that occurred to me as you were testifying. First of all, some of the points that you made early on almost sound as though you were listening to our prior experts who are world renowned in developing policies and studies on this kind of work arrangement in terms of management by outcome, not who you can see in your field of vision. Many of the things that you said, they spoke about. And we're talking about how they've been proven. These were not theories. Many of these were practices that they had already put into place. And as consultants had made recommendations and companies had followed them. One of the things, and your point about having to have a conversation within the departments is critical because, for example, there are state employees who deal with confidential information. So they shouldn't be doing this work on their home computer. There shouldn't be files of that nature that are housed in their, in their computer on their desktop. That's right. You can't have that. And it seems, and I remember when I was in Sacramento, one of the the most important things to staff was getting that parking space. They wanted that, desperately wanted that parking space. And the idea that you can then take one space and rotate it between 3 and perhaps 4 or 5 different members of the staff has lots of beneficial consequences. I'm also curious, it just occurred to me, are state employees still paying their monthly for their parking spaces?
Unfortunately, yes.
So, okay. And are those parking spaces?
And I will just say, I've heard different things from employees, like you say, you know what a premium a parking space is once you have it.
Right.
Everybody's unsure about when we're going to go back. Nobody wants to not pay it because they're told if they stop paying, they move to the bottom or they move on the waiting list. Well,
Yeah.
but if you've ever been on the waiting list, that is never any place you want to be. And
So are those parking structures, are those state-owned or are those leased, or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. It's a combination of both.
It doesn't make any sense to me, and maybe I'm wrong here, that those parking structures that are under the control of the state of California, I don't understand why employees should be compelled to be making monthly payments for those stalls. And you've got like 96,000 employees, 96,000 state workers. You're going to have a large percentage of those that are making payments on parking stalls that they can't use.
I would suggest the next people you call in is the Department of General Services and have them explain that to you.
All right.
I do not have an answer.
I think what is fascinating about this opportunity, because I do think this is an opportunity, is that you have a chance now to take the work situation and sort of peel off the layers that nobody really gives much thought to, such as having to pay for your parking when you can't use it. Any of those ancillary things that are associated with your job for the state of California that you are obligated to continue, but for which you don't receive a benefit. So you get a better understanding of exactly when the layers of the onion, and significant areas about where you can recover costs and maximize savings.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're right.
Commissioners, I see David Byers unmuted.
Sure, just a suggestion, take it for what it's worth. I'm very compelled by your testimony and your forward-leaning approach to these issues. And I would urge you to work with your colleagues in organized labor, Teamsters, the Labor Federation, and others to try and scope out a future of work-oriented approach to this, not just teleworking, but there are a number of other technological advances that we've looked at in the past. And to figure out the dimensions of a new, I'll call it social compact between the government and its workers that aims to take advantage of the values that you articulated of saving money, respecting workers, and delivering a superior work product. And that's going to be hard work. And what I worry about is that it devolves into labor disputes about collective bargaining, one unit or another unit within a particular department or discipline, without a holistic view, which I think you've articulated, for putting all of them together, because we're all in this together. And
Absolutely.
that means engaging with the governor and the legislature in an open way. And I think your leadership could really add a lot of value by working with your colleagues in organized labor. So I hope you do that.
Well, thank you. And I will certainly discuss that with Art Pulaski, the head of our Labor Federation here in California, on getting that put together, because it is an excellent idea. And I also didn't mention that I have been working very closely with and appreciating the relationship with Yolanda Richardson, the Secretary of GovOps. We stay in close contact. We have a weekly, if not bi-weekly call, working through different issues and everything else. And so the collaboration and the partnership has been extremely valuable.
Wonderful. Commissioner Erner, did you have anything? You're just, okay. No, I see you're muted. My apologies. Mr. Emerson.
Thank you for attending today. I appreciate your testimony. I have a question with as large a population of your union members that are working from home. I'm certain there's a number of them that live in rural areas where high-speed internet is a problem. What are you doing, or are you getting some assistance to help out on that problem? And what suggestions do you have that we could improve broadband high-speed internet in rural areas?
Working with departments, getting, hotspots, different things, we do that. I call that retail work. I do have a much bigger vision. I don't know if the commission can help with this, but I will share it with you, because I don't think a state that is the home of Silicon Valley and some of the best tech in the world should not have, high-speed broadband internet service for everyone. And I think the tech company should pay for it. They are going to get a tremendous benefit, and it has the added benefit of adding jobs, right? Because you got to build it out, you've got to get it out there. So at the same time that we put our community to work, it's also the added benefit of, being the first state in the nation that is totally broadband and figure out how to make it, if not free, then low cost. I mean, I think that's the least they can do to living in the best state in the nation.
Thank you. Are you having problems currently with some of your employees living in rural areas?
Some of them do, but I will say that some of them do, yes. Some of them do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I should mention that apropos of nothing, I guess, but Chattanooga, Tennessee was attempting to attract high-tech companies and younger employees. And so the city embarked on a program. They have some of the highest internet connection speeds in the entire country in Chattanooga. And so I think your point is, if they can do it in Chattanooga, and I've been to Chattanooga, but I came back to California, but if they can do it in Chattanooga, why are we not able to do it in California? So let me ask if we have any further questions from commissioners. It doesn't seem that we do. So I would, let me also join my fellow commissioners in expressing gratitude for your testimony and the insights that it provides to us. The next witness is someone you probably know, Peter Flores. You are, of course, should you choose to do so, welcome to remain and to hear that. But given your schedule, I'm not going to suggest that you have to. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I will probably catch him on tape.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, then I'll introduce our second witness, who, as you mentioned, is Peter Flores Jr. Mr. Flores is president of the California Attorneys, Administrative Law Judges, and Hearing Officers in State Employment, CASE for shorthand. CASE represents over 4,300 state-employed attorneys and administrative law judges at over 100 different state departments, agencies, and commissions. Mr. Flores has served as a CASE board member since 2006 and as president of the union since 2007. He is a deputy attorney general prosecuting criminal cases throughout Northern California for the Attorney General's office in San Francisco. From 1995 to 2005, he served as a deputy district attorney in Sacramento County. Prior to that, he was an associate practicing labor law with the law firm of Littler, Mendelson, Fastiff, Tishy, and Mathiasen in San Francisco. He has also served as a commissioner on California's Commission for Judicial Performance and as a board member of the criminal law section of the California State Bar. And he is a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association, the California La Raza Lawyers Association, and the San Francisco La Raza Lawyers Association. Mr. Flores.
Welcome, Mr. Flores.
Thank you. So, thank you, Mr. Rarick. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. I appreciated Yvonne's comments. I thought they were really thoughtful and really important, frankly. So there's really nothing she said that I disagree with, but there are some things that will probably be somewhat different for the type of members that we have in our organization, judges and attorneys. So, in the first instance, we also support teleworking. We don't have any number of how many people should be teleworking. I think that number, from our perspective, should probably be, is probably going to change over time. We think one of the important principles of teleworking or remote working, actually, it's sort of sometimes we call it remote working or distance working, like with our kids in school. They're not remote, they're not tele-schooling or learning, they're distance learning, right? I mean, so, but with remote working, some of the principles are, one that we think is important is that it be voluntary initially. And that will allow for better collaboration between the employer and the employee in terms of who it works best for and who it doesn't work well for. So some departments might want to go to remote and force employees into remote working situations. Well, depending on your economic well-being, this would apply to probably more to some of Yvonne's members than to a lot of our members, but depending on your debts and everything like that, you might not have a space in your home that's appropriate for remote working, right? I mean, so there are other issues that come up with that where people have family members at home. We don't want to force people to work from home if they have elder care that's going on there. And so that's having a big impact. And so where they can't do that. There are other home issues that we see and I think of as a prosecutor that others might not think of, where if a person's in a domestic violence situation, an employee's in a domestic violence situation is having to work from home, that's something we've seen generally society-wide during this pandemic with people being stuck together at home. So we want to be careful about having a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, right? I think we want to have flexibility there so that we don't cause unintended consequences, really, right? In terms of remote working. A second key principle for us in terms of remote working is that employee health has to be protected. And that goes to more of the ergonomic workstations. If your employer wants you to work from home, like in this current situation, this emergency, or if you prefer to work from home 3 days a week or 5 days a week, that it's still the employer's job to make sure that you have an ergonomic workplace, that your workplace is effectively safe for you, that your work isn't doing you harm. So we think that's still the employer's responsibility to take care of. I mean, there are some things that have come up during the pandemic in our members with regard to worker safety in terms of telephone usage. So we have members at DIR, Industrial Relations, who are enforcing the safety protocols for the pandemic and calling businesses and involved in enforcement calls. And there was some rush, I think, at some point to get them done, sometimes on a weekend, at one point on a weekend, and people had to call 100 businesses, and they were generally using their private cell phones. Well, as we all know, some business owners and people are very unhappy and see it as a very strong infringement on their personal liberties and on their rights and things. And I don't believe it should be politicized, but people take it that way. And we didn't want our members' personal cell phones and potentially contact information compromised when they're doing enforcement activities. So that goes on to a further later point about technology, but employee safety, we think, has to be paramount. Like, this has to be done in a safe way, basically. Another thing, Yvonne mentioned this, so it's the employer's responsibility to pay for all reasonable and necessary costs, basically. And the same departments, State Comp Insurance Fund and Covered California, are doing the $74 a month. It's our understanding from speaking to their general counsel how they came up with that number. One was it's a number that doesn't trigger any tax problems in terms of reimbursement. Two, it was actually just, it was in the ballpark of what they were getting, what they believed existed in terms of actual reimbursement. And to save themselves administrative costs of trying to go through each individual employee's reimbursement per month, they came up with a standardized amount that was supposed to cover that cost. But Department of Industrial Relations is doing it differently. They are actually reimbursing costs when you provide your receipts, and you do it just like you do any other travel expense. Now, there are some issues with that, and that all of our other departments aren't reimbursing costs at all. In the emergency, in the pandemic, those things weren't worked out. We think it's a problem. We think it's an equal pay for equal work problem that might foster future litigation, which is, of course, as lawyers and judges, that's how we sometimes see the world. But we think there's a high risk for that, and we might be compelled to do that sort of thing if there's not basically statewide standards. Like, we don't think that every department has to do it the same. And we think it's crucial that there be flexibility by department, but there still have to be some baseline standards that every department should meet in terms of employee costs and employee safety in particular. Another thing is, Yvonne mentioned this, like no arbitrary denial, basically. There are some people who just are against remote work. They want to see you at your desk, and that's how they think they're managing you. We have a big problem with that with our attorneys and with management. There are some old school managers, old school attorneys who think that you can't do the job if you're not seeing each other face to face, right? In terms of litigation or things like that. But we've proven through the pandemic and people who like teleworked 1 or 2 days a week in different departments that it can be done. In this pandemic, our attorneys at DOJ and the civil units are still doing the litigation against Donald Trump's, the federal government. I think we're up to 48 different lawsuits or different pieces of litigation. Litigation at the highest levels and of the most important nature in front of the United States Supreme Court still getting accomplished. I have 2 of my closest friends here in San Francisco who have made appearances before the California Supreme Court via Zoom during the pandemic. So this can still be done. In terms of another important issue, and to make it functional though, and it's been brought up by some of the commissioners and Ms. Walker previously, is technology is going to have to be upgraded, and there's going to have to be a big technology component and frankly investment to make it work appropriately and properly. I forget which of the commissioners brought up about confidential information and on home computers, and it's an issue in terms of space savings for attorneys and judges, and that of course my phone's going to ring. It's an issue with our members. In fact, we have in our contract that every department is supposed to make every possible effort basically to keep judges and lawyers in offices when possible, because every attorney has attorney-client privilege issues. Most litigation issues are confidential and or sensitive at a minimum. I do criminal law, so certainly all the police reports, I do a lot of child molest cases, sexual assault cases, any sort of case. I mean, and frankly, even a simple case that, is would seem unimportant to us and not as confidential. If it's a minor case, for, somebody who has a drug problem, and, those records are there and they are getting treatment and starting to work through that, their confidentiality is crucial to them and frankly to their life. I mean, so in terms of saving space for attorneys and judges, I think it's going to be a bigger challenge than for some other folks who don't deal with confidential information quite as much. I agree with what Yvonne said in terms of the management of employees from a distance, and that output's more important than the process. In fact, so in the criminal division at Department of Justice, where I work, we have a point system by case, depending on how complex it is and how involved it is. So there's basically a point system. And so we're tracking by points how much production we're doing, and you don't need to see a person face to face. You can do a lot of that without having to have a meeting with your supervisor. Our appellate attorneys are doing mostly legal research and writing, and they spend a lot of time not out on the floor, but in their offices doing all that research and writing. And doing that at home has actually been pretty efficient. Some of them like it a lot better. And the truth is, I think it's important to understand, so Cal HR and the state currently are putting out a general management policy, management memo and guideline about telework. They want to eliminate all informal telework, which is fine if you have a good policy, but there is informal telework that has been going on in a lot of departments. I had colleagues who lived a fair distance away, so the commute would be oppressive, who would come into the office, pick up a big case, an appellate case that had 20 boxes of material. They'd put it in their SUV, take it home, work for 3 weeks, doing all the research and writing there, pile it in and come back and file their documents and do a great job. And there was interaction with other people through email and through telephone conferences, but that was informal telework that was existing and functional, and it was focused on the work product. So we have a work product in the legal field that sort of the judges and our juries, depending on who you're facing, we get judged. And so whether you're successful or not is, you can't hide it in terms of the legal work typically. So one of the last things, I agree that this needs to be a collaborative process in terms of the management and the employees, and it needs to be an open process developed jointly, frankly. And then I just added this to my notes because of the question one of the commissioners asked about the impact on labor and the ability to organize. And there's no question that the pandemic and being home it's a negative impact on us in terms of our getting new members and our interacting with our members. It's been a little bit of a problem for us, but we've had to adjust. So we are now having our staff attend online Zoom or Blue Jeans or other formats, employee orientations. And employee orientations are really the way that you get new membership these days. There was an article in the Bee this week, I guess, and our unit actually did increase, is one of the few that increased membership during the pandemic. That's largely through email, reaching out through email blasts and a newsletter and things. And then any member who contacts us trying to be extra engaging and engaging wherever we can with them whenever there's a question. And then frankly, it's all about asking and asking them after we've helped them to spread the word to others who they're in contact with through their email and other connections or team connections and things. So the other thing is we are starting our first, I think we started them actually about 2 weeks ago, our first Zoom-based union meetings by department. So we're starting to do Zoom-based union meetings because we can't go down the hallway anymore. So they're not as effective so far via Zoom, but we are starting to work on trying to overcome those obstacles, frankly, and I think it can be done.
Mr. Flores, let me interrupt you for just a moment because I see Yana Sidley has been raising her hand and raising her hand. So something going on there.
That's really about the end of the issues I wanted to bring up. So I'm just happy to engage with everybody now.
Thank you. Commissioner Sidley.
So Peter, if I may,
yes.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it greatly. I am not a member of your union, but am a city lawyer, and we have our own association. And so I certainly understand many of the concerns that you're raising, but I do have, fundamentally, I think that we're looking at this situation in two separate buckets. One is what's going on now, that it's your life and it's a health issue to not go in, and it was an emergency to have people stay home to stop the spread of the virus. The question I have for you is, in the future, if we do not have this health issue, and then we have a situation where do we go to telework, and how do you propose that we deal with that fundamental issue of families who can or cannot afford certain things because you might have an attorney who is dealing in the same type of very sensitive cases that you are, drug rehab and domestic violence, where it does not make sense theoretically to have them work outside of the office because all of that documentation needs to be kept in a sensitive locked position. But that individual may very well want to work at home. And then, so then is it still the employer's responsibility to pay to make sure that the computer system at home has the ability to do that, that the chair is ergonomic, all of those things, if it is strictly the choice of the employee? And how do we properly and fairly address that?
Yeah, I mean, so, thank you for the question. I think they're really important, actually, and it's something we've started to wrestle with on our own union board about the difference between voluntary remote work and emergency mandatory, forced remote work, and it is a big difference. But in terms of the security issues and confidentiality issues, I don't think there is a difference, because we're having to deal with that now, and everybody, professionals and, people who have work that's going to continue, right? I've always taken files home with me at night to work on, in the evening, in front of the TV or at the dining room table, or we have a little office desk, which my wife and I fight over now. So I think the security issues are actually the same. I don't think the security issues and confidentiality issues change regardless of voluntary versus non-voluntary. So DOJ, for instance, now there's the 2-level authentication before I get on my remote email on my Outlook. I have my password, and then it goes to my phone, and I have to do the second thing for that. When I have confidential files, I actually have 2 laptops. I have my personal laptop, and I have the DOJ laptop. The DOJ laptop doesn't work for Zoom meetings and other things because it doesn't have a camera, right? I mean, so nor does my computer at my office. So in the pandemic, my wife's office happened to have extras, so I borrowed one of theirs, and then I bought one and got in line and got one eventually so that I could do these Zoom kind of meetings and things. So I think in terms of confidentiality, it's the same. In terms of the home office space, I think the security issues are going to be the same, right? I mean, so in terms of having a locking filing cabinet in your home, when I do trials, so I cover criminal trials actually for the north west part of California. We cover 16 counties, so I could be going all kinds of places, and I'm driving with my files to or from the office. And then when you're in trial, after court, you go back to the office, you work, you come home, you're still going to be working. You're going to grab a bite and you're going to keep working, right? So when I take those files, I mean, so it's not a written policy, but it's just an understanding we have on our trial team that you don't leave a single thing in the car. I frankly don't leave things in the car, in the garage even, because there are garage break-ins in San Francisco that are not uncommon. I actually take the time to schlep it all up into the locked house, right? I mean, so, but I think that, I think that most of these things can be worked through, and the voluntary and mandatory difference, I think, starts to drop away when you look at the individual issues. So like in terms of ergonomics and worker safety or confidentiality or management, I think if you focus on the underlying issues, whether it's voluntary or mandatory, I think becomes less important. Does that answer the question? Do you have?
Yeah. I mean, it's at the very broad level, certainly it addresses it. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Flores, it occurred to me in terms, because we've been talking about how to adapt to these changed circumstances as you attempt to ensure that you're able to recruit additional members into the union and also to maintain relationships and connections with your members, that the statutory scheme for that was developed long before computers and long before cell phones and texts and emails. have you found, and I neglected to ask Ms. Walker this, have you found impediments in existing statutory schemes that get in the way of doing what you need to do in this new era to communicate with your members and also to recruit?
You know, I don't know of any necessarily particular statutory schemes other than the basic, this is statutory, the basic prohibition against using state resources for union work in general, right? So like we don't really use, in my union, we don't really have the bulletin board methods and things. We typically go and talk to the members in our departments and things, but one of the things that has come up is the use of your work email for union contacts. And that's always been allowed because it's considered incidental, right? And it has typically been incidental, but in terms of not being able to talk to anybody and the only contact for some of our members that we have is their work email. We try to get private emails as much as we can, but somebody just won't give it or don't have it. There are actually a few people who don't have them. So that's the only issue we've come across in our union is the use of state resources, especially emails, to contact and deal with members. And it does become an issue if somebody's under discipline. And, usually you could go, and if they were under discipline, you could go and talk to them in their office or my office privately when you had to, and you could speak. But using the employer's email system to try to talk to a member who's under discipline is a problem, because there are departments who have, just through their conduct, we think have monitored those emails at times, right? During bargaining or other things. So that's the only kind of areas where we've encountered it so far.
Right. I mean, I'm always reminded about what Willie Brown said about emails, that the E stands for evidence.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. E stands for evidence.
We had, go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just going to say, we had Willie as a consultant for a few years. So Willie knows all about it.
Yeah. So let me ask my fellow commissioners if there are any additional comments or questions that you have, Mr. Flores. I see none. All right. So, Mr. Flores, let us express our appreciation. I'm sorry, David, did you want to go, or are you saying waving it off? Never mind. Okay. No. Right. You're muted.
Free legal advice.
There you go.
So I take very much to heart your recommendations about the attorney-specific things. For us, as we try and write a report about this subject, any guidance you, or if you can point us to someone else, can offer on how to create a comprehensive statewide policy or set of guidances so that we have a whole of government approach to the topic of telework, but that we take into account the needs of different departments. Because there's a big tension there. And if it devolves to every department creates their own policy because they all claim that they're unique, you end up with disparate outcomes on questions such as the one you were discussing with Commissioner Sidley about who pays for the equipment, or who sets the work rules, or how do you do supervision of somebody who's working online. So any guidance that you would have about how to think about the legal structure that would enable general guidance from the state, and then some delegation of discretion, but not over delegating to create a kind of confederation or a cacophony of views at the agency level. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for the question. It's something we've actually talked about on our board with regard to the different members inside of our union. There's only 4,400, but it's judges, it's people who are basically like general counsel for different departments, civil lawyers, criminal lawyers. There's just a big variety of practice and things. And the way that we think it should be handled. And I think the state is approaching this somewhat in the wrong way. So the current management memo and guidelines that they have, for instance, on reimbursement in general, like whether you reimburse for remote work or not, to allow for flexibility, they're basically saying each department should do that. That each department should determine whether or not they're going to reimburse and what they're going to reimburse for. We think that's a big problem. One, reimbursement is covered by our contract, so the state can't just give everybody leeway to violate it as they determine it within their individual departments. But two, it doesn't set any principles or baselines for conduct, right? I mean, so that's why I think of it as different principles. So, a basic principle is that the reasonable and necessary costs need to be paid by the employer, right? And then, you can get more into the weeds with that a little bit and say, you got to have a chair, a desk, a computer, telephone, and a printer, basically. Those main kind of things, the main office items you need. But there needs to be a baseline, because some departments who because of their management style or because of their budgetary problems or both or other factors, won't want to provide anything, not a single thing, right? But others will see it in the long view and frankly treat it the way I think most private industry is treating this pandemic and handling things and trying to equip their employees to be successful. So another principle, like I said before, would be that employee health and ergonomics need to be, the state basically has responsibility for that and needs to make sure that that's accomplished. Now they can have leeway in how they do it, but to me it's about establishing those general principles and then allowing leeway then around those principles.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that you basically have a floor.
Exactly.
Right. Go ahead.
And a floor might be the wrong way to approach it, but basically this is I guess a minimum, but a requirement, right? Like this is a requirement, but you still have leeway around it.
Of course, right. All right. Thank you for that, Commissioner Beyer. Anyone else? I see no raised hands. Everybody's muted. So, Mr. Flores, I want to express our appreciation for your testimony and giving us your perspective. It's going to be important in piecing together the parts of testimony and information that we get coming up with recommendations. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you all. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, sir. So we have no other witnesses. I assume this is the part of the meeting where we look to see if there's public comment. Is that correct, Ethan?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. So if Rachel or Ashley will put the directions back up onto the screen for members of the public who are on the call. If you're interested in making public comment, you can use the raised hand function in Zoom. So you can, if you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand. Or if you have phoned into the meeting, you may send us an email at littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. That address is on the screen now, littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. Include your name and the phone number from which you've joined the meeting. That's important so that we know who to unmute if you are called on for public comment. We'll give the members of the public just a moment to send those emails. Do so quickly, please, if you wish to make public comment. So raise hand or email us at littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. If you do wish to make public comment, the commission limits public comments to 3 minutes per speaker. So please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll ask Rachel or Ashley. I'm frankly not sure who is checking this, but do we have anyone who has used the raised hand function?
Yeah, we have someone who is making public comment via Zoom.
Okay.
Rita, I'm going to turn on your ability to talk.
Can you hear me?
We can. So if you can go ahead and identify yourself and then go ahead, please.
Okay, my name is Rita Lewis and I'm a registered nurse and I work at San Quentin. So that's California Correctional Healthcare Services. And I should also mention, I'm a very proud member of Local 1000, and I'm a steward, and I'm very active in the Nurse Alliance of California and the National Nurse Alliance for SEIU Healthcare. I think what I wanted to first of all, everything Yvonne Walker said, but I also wanted to particularly mention that it's really important to have some kind of an objective telework coordinator for every department, because at this point it's so incredibly subjective. And I can just say, as a nurse, which, you know, I'm definitely an essential worker, but my essential job, I have a desk job, 100% desk job, and I've been working remotely since March, but against a lot of resistance. And as soon as I realized how successful it was for my position, I reached out to Correctional Healthcare Services, the executive team, receivers, nurses team, and I just said, everyone with my position, utilization management, should be teleworking, for everybody's general safety, health, and everything. And it was just met with so much resistance. And to some extent hostility. I found that at my personal workplace, where my chief nurse executive at the time was very clear that he was really hostile and against the idea of nurses teleworking, desk-based or not. Actually had called me in to report at one point during the height of everything. And I don't know if people were following the news, but there were some serious COVID problems at San Quentin. And as a high-risk person, I felt it was very irresponsible for them to demand me to come in. And fortunately, the chief executive officer of healthcare kind of overrode my nurse manager to allow me to continue to telework. And I'm still teleworking. And I think very effectively. And I think, one of the things that I had suggested to the nursing leadership is that they should take the time to look at every nursing job and see which ones can be done remotely. And if maybe not 100% of the time, 2, 3, 4 days a week. And there are a lot of jobs like that in public health and transfer their case management, but the dismissal has always been, you're essential. Well, yes, that's true. I will agree. I have an essential function, but I am also able to do it very effectively remotely, which has really been to everybody's benefit. And I also have found that in speaking with our return to work coordinator, for example, that this has been a historical issue, that even reasonable accommodations temporarily for people with maybe a temporary or permanent disability have just not been accommodated with telework. So again, I think what I'm mostly here to advocate for is that every department really needs an objective telework coordinator, to look at the duties of the job and say, can it be done remotely? And if it can, we should have that opportunity. And there's been policy in CalHR for 20 years. There's been policy in our contract, for example, our SEIU contract, including it for nursing to telework. And it was always just routinely dismissed as, not feasible. So anyway, I would just like to advocate for a general baseline, as has been discussed, but also for a requirement to actually have a place you go to have your situation reviewed for your job duties, especially certainly at this time.
Ms. Lewis, you are just a little bit over your 3 minutes, so thank you. I don't know if the commissioners have questions or not, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you.
Ashley, do we have others who have used the raised hand function?
No, there's no one else that has a raised hand in Zoom.
Okay, and has anyone emailed us to indicate they want to make public comment?
No, we have received no emails.
Okay.
Thank you, Ethan. With that, we'll close the public comment. And before we conclude, I just was wondering, Ethan, do you have any words of direction with respect to what's coming up?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to briefly remind the commissioners, we will have one more hearing on at least one more hearing on this topic, at which we will hear from the administration, from the Newsom administration, with regard to remote work, but they could not testify today due to a scheduling issue, and we do not know exactly when that hearing will be, but there will be one more hearing at least on this topic. But the next meeting of the commission actually is in 2 weeks from today, on November the 19th. That will probably be the last meeting of the calendar year. As you know, the commission traditionally takes a break for December. That's a business meeting. I would call the commissioner's attention to the fact that that is also at 1 p.m. So Thursday, November 19th at 1 p.m., a business meeting. We will have, I believe, 2 or perhaps 3 reports ready for commission approval. The first of the likely series of reports on the pandemic recovery, the biennial report of the commission, and perhaps the intimate partner violence report. That might be pushed back one meeting, but in any event, we'll have 2, maybe 3 reports for commission approval. We also will be discussing the hearing schedule. There will be a proposed hearing schedule, which we will get to commissioners well in advance of the hearing, outlining a proposed hearing schedule for 2021. So we'll be discussing that and some requests that we have received for additional studies. We'll get full information on all of that to the commissioners well in advance of the hearing. So, or of the business meeting rather. So Thursday, November 19th at 1 p.m., both approval of multiple reports and discussion of the hearing schedule and topics for 2021. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe we have any other business to cover today.
Good. Well, let me offer my congratulations to Dion. That microphone is just a godsend. We can hear everything you have to say. And look, I just think it's really important, given your experience perspective, that when you do post questions and offer comments, that we have the benefit of it. And I'm glad that you got the microphone.
I want to thank you, Ashley, for getting it all together for me.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. Thanks to our Kathy. Go ahead.
I was curious as to what the microphone looks like. Can you hold it up?
Oh, it's very small.
Wow.
See it? Yeah, it sits on a little stand.
Nice.
And it just sits right by the computer.
And it looks like a Bluetooth.
Oh, well, that I don't know.
Well, there's no wire connecting the two, right?
Oh, there's a wire connecting to my computer.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a
Plugged in.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Very good. And again, thanks to staff for extraordinary work. Well-run meeting, much appreciated, and everybody stay safe, stay healthy. And I did miss your granddaughter, Bill. I didn't see her this time. Maybe she's not there for a visit, but anyway, thank you, everybody. And that concludes our November 5th meeting. Everybody stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.